the Arabian Racehorse Podcast with Debbie Burt and Stephen Molyneux.
Hi, I'm joined again by Stephen Molyneux from Dubai. Hi, Stephen.
Hi, Debbie. How are you?
Yeah, very well, very well. The lovely hot weather seems to have disappeared, and I'm back in jumpers again. You're obviously still in the depths of the summer out there, I would imagine.
Yeah, we are. It sounds as though your hot weather's coming back though. Next weekend, maybe.
Oh well, let's hope so. Anyway, so today we're going to look at the Wathba Stallion Cup Handicap Stakes, which was a 0 to 55 run at Chepstow. We had a good field of 10 for that race, won by Aloof, who's clearly not the most straightforward of fillies, but certainly on the upgrade. What did you think, Stephen?
Yeah, it was definitely a success that looked unlikely for a long way. But Chepstow is one of those tracks that can lend itself to horses coming fast and late. And I'm sure Joshua Bryan on board Aloof was quite happy to see them racing a long way out. Obviously, Conker made a fairly early bid for glory, or certainly took his jockey to the front, went with plenty of zest, but that did help set things up for the closers. And Aloof was, I suppose, comfortably enough in the end, able to make it 2 from 2 for the season, despite the fact that the winning margin was only ahead in the end. But she's certainly a very distinctive mare. She's progressing well, and great to see the smaller trainers getting these successes on the board. She's obviously off a lowish base to start with. I think she was rated 40 going into her previous victory. She was a little bit out of the weights on that occasion, was able to defy the £5 rise. And given that she's only rated 45, she'll likely stay in this sort of 0 to 50 bracket. And I think there's another race for her towards the end of the season. And not had many purebred Arabians be able to win 2 or 3 in a season, let alone when the season is as short as it is this campaign. So fair play to Steve Blackwell, who had the distinction of training in the third as well. Al Jawahir doing what Al Jawahir does, and that's Gimmy's running. So fair play to the Blackwell team.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, Aloof is a homebred. He bred her out of Spirited Game, which he did very well with a few seasons ago. She's an ex Sheikh Mohammed bred horse, I think one of the very last ones that got sold at the dispersal. And of course, she's related to some quite useful winners. So I guess it's no surprise that even with the first foal, who certainly probably looked a bit backward last year, I think it's no surprise that she's improved a little bit. How much more improvement is in there remains to be seen. I think there's probably a little bit more, but at the same time, she does look the sort of horse who her own worst enemy is herself, it has to be said. Steve's fairly uncomplimentary about her from time to time, but nonetheless, she can still run and still win races. Obviously, we saw the heritage horses were quite possibly open to further improvement. And as we suspected, the younger one without the penalty, Heritage Valentino, ran very well under Holly Doyle.
Yeah, I think the jockey bookings rather suggested that might be the case. Heritage Valentino, certainly a horse that's found his feet this season. First couple of runs were perhaps a little bit disappointing, but placed the last twice now, which, in contrast to Heritage Vedel, who won after a lengthy absence the last time, probably lacked the scope to go forward, and could only manage 7th under the penalty at Chepstow. So, yeah, I'm sure James would have been happy with the way Heritage Valentino went forward from that first run. First 3 all came clear. The rest, Bin Al showed maybe a little bit more than had been previously the case. And similarly, Conker, who, as I mentioned earlier, probably just went with a bit too much zest and faded out of things late on. So there's bits and pieces of encouragement. We've got younger and exposed horses that were further down the field, but I'm sure the experience isn't going to be lost on the likes of Zakeda Zian, probably even Belle Angelique, who at least completed this time. Al Ghazal looks a work in progress, and similarly Al Hattab. So for it was a low grade event, 0 to 50. I think it was probably one of the better, 0 to 55, beg your pardon. I think it's probably one of the better types of races we've seen that in that grade in recent years, really.
Yeah, and of course, as you say, there are 1 or 2 works in progress down the bottom. Certainly, Paul doesn't like to race his fillies until they're 5, so they're always going to be a little bit more playing catch up. And certainly, that there's probably more to come from her, but one would assume next year. And now we move on to our next race at Lingfield. It's a 1.25 miles, 0 to 85 handicap. Bit disappointing that we've only got the 3 runners out of 8 entries. However, they're good quality entries, and certainly the top horse Rebel Athbar at the moment looks a horse on who's open to improvement, and certainly with the Derby entry you'd be expecting that. But his one chink is the fact that he's never raced on an all-weather surface.
Yeah, and the all-weather surfaces at this time of year are perhaps trickier than normal. It's obviously seen as a go-to for most trainers who don't want to run their nicer young horses on a firm surface, sort of talking thoroughbreds there. But with the heat that we've had, the all-weather surfaces, they react differently, and maybe that explains why we've got a smaller field than perhaps we'd like. But Rebel Athbar, as you say, is certainly very progressive. Did well to belie inexperience when winning at Windsor. That was obviously his second start, but first in a handicap against exposed but tough handicappers, the likes of Ortar and Bin Alri that day. And yeah, it was another small field at Doncaster last time, but the wide open expanses of the Town Moor could easily have caught a young horse out, and he managed to beat Alma Buba, who we've spoken about regularly as being a very solid conveyance in this type of race. So definitely Rebel Athbar arrives here on the up. Should take plenty of beating, really. I know he's gone up a long way in the weights, but it's almost the type of race where, now that we've only got the 3 runners, the rise in the weights is of less significance. And I think, as you were to point out, the only slight doubt now would be how the horse reacts to an all-weather surface that will be playing different to what it ordinarily would be.
Yeah, this is it. And it's not beyond all realms of possibility that he could get found out. And the 2 horses he's up against have got a tremendous amount of all-weather form, certainly on the poly track. And in Zayn Zyperian's case, he's a course and distance winner, albeit in a much lower grade. He certainly looked like when he was second last time that there was probably perhaps a little more scope for improvement, but whether it's enough to improve beyond Rebel Athbar, even Rebel Athbar not taking to the surface, and we'll probably have to wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, you can't knock Zayn Zyperian, really. He was a dual winner last year. He started off this season with a good win off the mark of 60, and I think went a long way at Brighton last time to showing that he is an improved performer this year. The mark of 66 that he was on then is a career high, and he was fairly well beaten in the end by Tijari, but it was a very solid effort, proven over the trip and track, as you've already mentioned, with that victory last July. So there's a lot in his favour, really, but the one doubt is he's probably never come up against, he did come up against Rebel Athbar earlier in the season, and their relative rates of improvement probably don't quite stack up. Rebel Athbar's obviously got plenty more in his locker, but Zayn Zyperian will no doubt keep him honest, as indeed I think Paul Simmons' other horse will as well. The Ancor Centurion, who certainly faces his easiest assignment for some time.
Yeah, and I mean, he's another who's proven on the poly track. He had both his wins, I think, came at Chelmsford. My one concern about Ancor Centurion, we often find that older horses want a bit more trip as they develop. His 3 previous runs, I think, over this distance haven't been particularly encouraging. But then, having said that, one of those was in the Group 1 Dubai International Stakes, which is, one of the best races in the country. So, it would be foolish to read too much into that, although obviously it's going to be a concern that the 1.25 mile trip in the past, at any rate, hasn't played to his strengths.
No, exactly. I think, like you say, you could probably excuse all 3 of those races, really. The one you've mentioned being a Group 1. I think another one came at the end of a hard season, and another one came on his reappearance. So if you are being kind, you could make excuses for all 3 of those. And he could well have a tactical advantage. He could sort of set the pace he wants and ensure that it isn't really a 1.25 mile race, and it becomes a bit of a sprint over the trip, and perhaps suits the milers a bit more. I'm sure the jockey on board, Rebel Athbar, will be keen to ensure that isn't the case. But I think he's been building himself up this season. He's had the 3 runs now. The best of them came last time in that Group 2 at Newbury behind Clear Athbar. He'd obviously had the lengthy absence to overcome coming into this season, and bearing in mind he was rated as high as 107 in his prime, then an 85 is pretty much a career low mark. I think he started off around about 82 or 85, something like that. So it's his best chance for some time. So for all that it's only a 3-runner race, for all that Rebel Athbar is quite clearly the improving horse in there, the other two are, as I said, going to keep him honest, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if for any reason Rebel Athbar doesn't take to the surface, it could well, fall to either one of those if they can improve beyond what they've been showing so far, really, or in Zane's Hyperion's case, and obviously Zane's Anchor on Turian, as you say, rated 107 in his prime, so this is quite a drop for him.
No, it certainly is. The other thing to mention about the all-weather surface as well, I'm not sure we've seen too much at Lingfield recently, but I've seen a bit of racing at Kempton and Lingfield and Chelmsford, Wolverhampton and Chelmsford, and as the surface rides a bit differently, it is harder to come from off the pace. It can be a little bit testing. I know there's only 3 of them, and Rebel Athbar's unlikely to be that far off the pace anyway, but it is just a very small tactical advantage in the favour of Zion and Coulson Turin, should they choose to make use of it.
And just to conclude the programme, earlier in the year, his breeder, Paul Simmons of Zayn Arabians, was faced with the heartbreaking situation of losing a mare just after foaling. However, it all came good in the end with a foster mare, and I went down to see him and find out how that went last month. So we'll just look at that video now.
Really tragic to lose Calista, shortly after she foaled this beautiful colt. And then, like I said, you're left there with a foal that you're basically bottle feeding, trying to work out the right thing to do. I didn't want him to leave the property. I didn't particularly want a strange mare on, but I obviously didn't want him to be raised as an orphan. So, talking to the vets, they were like, well, have you got any mares that are experienced mothers we could bring into milk and bring into hormones, and, they could feed the foals? And I said, and, you think about all these options. And then I remembered that I have quite a strange way of breeding. I weaned the foals really late. So Sky, who sort of had her first foal last year, I'd only weaned her filly the week before. So obviously she still had milk, but I didn't think for a second that she would adopt the foal. And I talked to my vet, and my vet said, well, why don't we just try it, So, he was born on the Sunday, sort of Monday lunchtime, the vet was there. We brought Sky round to meet this little orphan foal, and we sort of showed him over the gate, and unbelievably, she started whickering to him, calling to him, he trotted over. And then they give them this sort of hormone injection to bring on maternal feelings. She was still running milk, because she'd obviously only had her foal the yearling weaned the week before. So I kind of milked her and covered him in her milk, so he smelt of her. She got this hormone injection, put her in 10 minutes later, and she was licking him all over, and he was feeding within the minute, and that was it. They were like mother and foal, and you would never know it. And she was, I left her with him for sort of in the barn for a day, and then sort of gradually reduced her out into the field. But no, she's brilliant. I mean, you would never know it wasn't her foal. But yeah, it is an interesting story. So Sky's mother actually was my first ever winning Arab racehorse, Sweet Simplicity. But she was a terrible mother. Her first foal, died within a week, which was really sad. And then Sky was the second foal, but she wasn't a natural mother. She didn't really like the foal. Liz Harrington actually foaled her down for me and put blinkers on her. So she would let the foal feed if she couldn't see her going up. So I left her there for about a week, 6 weeks, and then they came back here, and then the mare basically went, well, I'm home now, I don't want to deal with that. And Sky then, picked up a minor infection and was ill, and it was all a bit of a nightmare. So I kept her on her mother for a little bit longer, and then I had another mare with a foal. And when Sweet Simplicity started getting kind of aggressive, when Sky was about 6 weeks old, we basically took Sweet Simplicity away, and Sky wandered up to my other mare, who just almost instantly adopted her and raised her. So Sky was actually adopted at 6 weeks by another mare and raised it. She has now adopted this foal and is raising him. And then there's another kind of a twist of fate. Sky's first foal a couple of years ago was an Al Jakbar colt that was stillborn. And she was devastated, and that was her first ever foal. So yeah, it's almost like done a full circle of this mare that was adopted herself, has now adopted a foal, and she lost her colt, he lost his mum. So there's a bit of a kind of a circle of life, or a bit of a sort of interesting pattern there. But I mean, she's just an amazing mare anyway. She's won her races, she got placed, she won 5 endurance races. She gave me a great filly last year, and now she's adopted this foal. So she's a bit of a treasure. I'm very lucky to have her.
And that concludes our programme for this week. We'll be back shortly, and our next big race, of course, is going to be our derby at Doncaster with the UAE President's Cup. Your thoughts on that at all, looking ahead?
Well, the French always send over one of the best of their generation, really, don't they? So that should be an exciting race. Izadi Star looks like being it at the moment. There's Moshrif in there as well, and I think we've got a genuine contender from the UK as well, from Phil Collinson's yard, from what we saw from Ekle Lathbar the other week. So maybe even Rebel Lathbar goes in there as well. So yeah, this race at Lingfield that we've got upcoming could ensure that there are a couple of decent challengers from the UK.
Of course, and we'll look forward to previewing that next time. So thanks very much for your time, Stephen.
Cheers, Debbie, no problem.
And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.